The year was 479 BC. The dust of the Great Persian War had not yet settled, but the air in the royal capital of Susa was thick with the scent of failure. King Xerxes I, the King of Kings, the master of the four corners of the world, was a man returning from the edge of the abyss. Only a few years prior, he had crossed the Hellespont with an army so vast it was said to drink entire rivers dry. He had burned Athens to the ground. He had stood over the broken bodies of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. He was a god on earth. But then came Salamis. Then came Plataea. Xerxes returned to Persia, not as a victor, but as a man whose divinity had been bruised. In the ancient world, a king's legitimacy was tied to his success in war. When a king fails abroad, he becomes a predator at home. His pride was wounded, and a wounded lion is the most dangerous creature in the palace. He didn't return to Susa to govern. He returned to find a distraction. He needed to prove he still possessed absolute power over something. He found that something in the corridors of his own harem. He found it in the eyes of a woman he could never rightfully have, the wife of his own brother, Ametris. To understand the tragedy that follows, we must understand the woman at its center. History, often written by men, denies us her name, but it cannot deny us her impact. She was the wife of Prince Ametris, the king's most loyal brother and the satrap of Bactria. In a court defined by backstabbing, eunuchs, and shifting alliances, the wife of Ametris was an anomaly. She was a woman of legendary beauty, but more importantly, she was a woman of ironclad virtue. In the Persian system, the king's whim was law. If the king wanted a woman, he took her. But this woman was different. She was devoted to her husband with a purity that Xerxes found both intoxicating and insulting. Day after day, the King of Kings descended from his throne to play the part of a common suitor. He showered her with gifts that could buy entire provinces. He offered her jewels from the mines of India and silks from the edges of the known world. He promised her influence that would rival even his own queen, Amestris. But she saw through the gold. She saw a man trying to fill the hollow void of his military defeat with the conquest of a woman's soul. Her constant, quiet, and respectful rejection drove Xerxes into a state of quiet, dangerous fury. It was the first time in his life someone had told the King of Kings, no. The court moved from Susa to Sardis, and the obsession followed. Xerxes, realizing he could not break the mother through force or wealth, devised a plan of legendary cruelty. He decided to use the woman's own blood against her. He arranged a marriage between his eldest son and heir Derisa and the daughter of Ametris, a young girl named Atante. On the surface, this looked like a royal favor, a binding of the two branches of the family. But in the dark mind of Xerxes, it was a bridge. By bringing Atante into his immediate household, he would have a legitimate excuse to be in the presence of her mother every single day. He believed that proximity, time, and the pressure of being under his roof would eventually erode the mother's resistance. But then, the plan took a turn that even the gods of Persia couldn't have predicted. As they traveled back to the grand palace of Susa, Xerxes spent more time with his new daughter-in-law. He saw in the young Ate a reflection of her mother's beauty, but without her mother's wisdom or iron will, the predatory hunger shifted. He began to look at Atante, the wife of his own son, with the same lust he had felt for her mother. Young Atante was a product of the palace. She was flattered by the attention of the most powerful man on earth. She didn't have the life experience to see the king for what he was, a consumer of lives. Soon the halls of Susa whispered with a scandalous secret, a betrayal of a son by a father, a betrayal of a mother by a daughter. The affair began, and the moral compass of the Achaemenid dynasty was shattered. While Xerxes was lost in his lust, a far more dangerous figure was watching from the shadows, Queen Amestris. To the Greeks, Amestris was the archetype of Persian cruelty. She was not a victim of the king's infidelity. She was a sovereign power in her own right. This was a woman who, in her older years, would bury 14 noble Persian children alive as a sacrifice to the god of the underworld. She didn't believe in the soft politics of the harem. She believed in the total annihilation of her enemies. Amestris saw everything. She saw the king's frequent absences. She saw the way Artente walked with a new, unearned confidence. She saw the way the girl wore jewelry that belonged to the queen's own collection. But Amestris didn't strike immediately. She was a weaver of webs. She began to formulate a plan for vengeance that wouldn't just kill her rivals, it would erase them. Her anger simmered into a cold, calculated masterpiece of retribution. She decided that she would not blame the girl alone. In her twisted logic, she believed the mother, the wife of Amestris, was the architect. She believed the mother had allowed or pushed her daughter into the king's bed to humiliate the queen. The catalyst for the explosion was a robe. Amestris spent months weaving a magnificent ceremonial robe. This wasn't just clothing, it was a sacred garment. It was made of the rarest Tyrian purple, shot through with golden thread, and embroidered with the symbols of the Persian sun. It was a masterpiece that represented the queen's labor and her devotion to the king. She gave it to Xerxes as a gift. It was a test. Xerxes, in a moment of utter, infatuated foolishness, wore the queen's robe while visiting his mistress Artente. He was so high on the drug of his own power that he felt untouchable. He looked at the girl and made the most dangerous promise a Persian king could make, the king's promise. "Ask of me anything," he said, "and it shall be yours." In the Persian system, this was a cosmic oath. To break it was to admit you were not the representative of the god Ahura Mazda. It was to admit you were a liar. Xerxes expected her to ask for a palace, a city, or a province. He was not prepared for what happened next. Artente, perhaps coached by those in the harem who wanted to see the queen fall, looked him in the eye and demanded the robe he was wearing, the robe his wife had woven with her own hands. A wave of icy fear washed over Xerxes. He knew instantly that if Artente wore that robe, Amestris would know the full extent of the betrayal. It wasn't just about sex anymore. It was about the usurpation of the queen's status. He begged the girl to change her mind. For hours, the King of Kings was on his knees before his mistress. He offered her the gold of the royal treasury. He offered her command over armies. He offered her the 10,000 immortals. But Artente was arrogant. She was young, she was beautiful, and she thought she had won. She refused every offer. She wanted the robe. Cornered by his own sacred oath, Xerxes finally gave in. He stripped the robe from his shoulders and handed it to the girl. Artente did not hide it. She wore it throughout the palace, parading her victory like a banner of war. When Amestris saw the girl wearing her handiwork, she didn't scream. She didn't rage. She simply watched with eyes like flint. She knew exactly what she was going to do, and she knew exactly when she was going to do it. The Persian calendar was marked by one day of absolute royal vulnerability, the festival of the Tikta, the king's birthday. On this day, the King of Kings was required by ancient law to grant any one request made by the queen. It was a day of ritualized humility. Xerxes sat on his golden throne, surrounded by the smell of frankincense and the sound of harps, unaware that he was about to be forced into the most horrific decision of his life. The feast reached its peak. The wine had flowed for hours. Queen Amestris stood up and approached the throne. The room fell into a deathly silence. The noblemen and the eunuchs held their breath. She didn't ask for land. She didn't ask for gold. She looked her husband in the eye and demanded the wife of Amestris. She didn't want the girl. She wanted the mother delivered to her, body and soul, to do with as she pleased. Xerxes was paralyzed. He knew the wife of Amestris was innocent. He had pursued her and she had rejected him. She had done nothing wrong. He tried to reason with Amestris in front of the entire court. He offered her the wealth of nations, but the queen remained as unyielding as a mountain. The law of the Tector was absolute. In front of the gods and the nobility, the king could not say no in a final, pathetic attempt to save his brother's wife. Xerxes summoned Macystes to a private chamber. He didn't tell him about the queen's demand. Instead, he tried to fix the situation with a political maneuver. He told Macystes that he must immediately divorce his wife and marry one of Xerxes' own daughters. He believed that if the woman was no longer Macystes' wife, she would no longer be a threat to the queen's status, and he could somehow mitigate the punishment. Macystes was a man of honor. He was baffled. He looked at the king and said, "My lord, I love my wife. She is the mother of my sons. She has been my faithful companion for my entire life. Why would I cast her aside for a girl I do not know?" Macystes left the palace in a state of confusion, unaware that while he was speaking to his brother, the queen's executioners were already moving. Xerxes, defeated by his own laws and his wife's malice, had given the order. The wife of Macystes was seized from her home by the royal guard. She was not taken to a prison. She was taken directly to the queen's private quarters. What followed is one of the most brutal passages in the history of the ancient world. Amestris did not want a quick death. A quick death is a mercy. She wanted to erase the woman's humanity and her beauty. She ordered the executioners to start with her face. They cut off her nose, then her ears, then her lips. The woman was kept conscious, forced to feel every stroke of the bronze blade. Amestris watched with a clinical, detached interest. But she wasn't finished. In a fit of jealous rage, she ordered the woman's breasts to be sliced off and thrown to the dogs in the palace courtyard. This was a symbolic strike against her role as a mother and a wife. Finally, the queen ordered the woman's tongue to be torn out from its roots. She wanted to ensure that the woman could never again cry out for justice, could never tell her story, and could never again speak the names of her children. The wife of Macystes was now a silent, mangled ruin. Amestris then did something truly demonic. She had the woman bandaged just enough to keep her from bleeding out and sent her back to Macystes' house in a royal litter. She wanted the husband to see the prize he had refused to divorce. When Macystes opened the litter and saw the creature inside, the world stopped turning. He didn't see a human being. He saw the physical manifestation of the Achaemenid rot. In that moment, his loyalty to his brother died. The King of Kings was no longer his brother. He was a monster. Macystes did not wait for the next sunrise. He gathered his sons, his loyal personal guard, and his servants. He loaded his mutilated wife onto a wagon and fled toward the east. He was the governor of Bactria, and the people there loved him. He knew that if he could reach the border, he could raise an army of fierce mountain warriors and march back to Susa to tear Xerxes from his throne. Xerxes was informed of the flight almost immediately. He knew that a rebellion in Bactria would shatter the empire. He could not allow his brother to become a martyr. He dispatched his elite cavalry, the Immortals. They were given one order: no mercy. The race was on. The royal postal roads of Persia were the best in the world, and the king's orders traveled faster than a family weighed down by a wounded woman. Macystes and his sons were overtaken on the desolate stretches of the Iranian plateau. The battle was short and bloody. Macystes fought with the desperation of a man who had already lost his soul. One by one, his sons were cut down before his eyes. Finally, Macystes himself was overwhelmed and executed. The mangled wife, who had survived the queen's torture, was finally put to death, her silent misery coming to an end in the desert sand. The entire line of Macystes, the most loyal branch of the royal family, was wiped from history in a single afternoon of slaughter. Xerxes had preserved his throne, but he had lost his empire. The story of the savage mutilation spread through the satrapies in whispers. The aura of divinity that surrounded the king began to fade. The people saw that their ruler was a man who would allow his own family to be butchered to satisfy a queen's whim. The palace of Susa became a tomb. Xerxes retreated into a world of paranoia and excess. He became a prisoner of his own court, surrounded by eunuchs and officials who no longer respected him, but only feared him. Queen Amestris remained the power behind the throne, a shadow queen who would continue to exert a terrifying influence over the next generation. In 465 BC, the inevitable happened. A high-ranking official named Artabanus led a conspiracy. Xerxes, the man who had once led millions against the Greeks, was murdered in his bed. The legacy of Xerxes is often told through the lens of great men and great battles. We talk of Thermopylae and Salamis, but the true story of the fall of Persia is found in the blood of the wife of Macestes. It is a reminder that the greatest threat to a nation rarely comes from the enemies at the gates. It comes from the darkness within the palace. It comes from absolute power wielded by those with no moral compass. As the ruins of Persepolis are swallowed by the sand, the story of the golden robe remains, a haunting echo of a time when beauty, virtue, and loyalty were not enough to protect a family from the whims of a king and the vengeance of a queen. If you have stayed with us through this dark journey into the heart of the Persian Empire, thank you. This story is a testament to the fact that history is not just about dates and maps. It is about the human heart and its capacity for both incredible virtue and unimaginable cruelty. What do you think was the turning point? Was it Xerxes' military failure, or was the rot already there? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Ancient Mindcast for more deep dives into the hidden, often terrifying lives of the ancient world's most powerful rulers. Until next time, keep looking into the shadows of the past.